Chapter 48. What does not exist upon waking? Alden walked through Hearthglen. The cobblestones of the main street were dry and warm beneath his boots, as though the sun had been there forever. On either side, houses of wood and stone lined the road with low roofs and open windows, letting out voices, laughter, the everyday sound of a simple life in no hurry to reach anywhere. There was noise in the village, not screams, not alarms. Living noise. The distant ringing of hammer on metal, the murmur of overlapping conversations, the bleat of a goat in some nearby yard. Alden wandered without aim, carried by the familiarity of each corner, each scent. Fresh bread, wood smoke, herbs drying in the sun. Something strange tightened in his chest. Not surprise, an ancient calm. When he reached the square, he stopped. It opened before him with the same arrangement as always. The stone well at the center, the worn wooden benches smoothed by generations, children running in circles while a woman shouted for them to be careful. An old man argued over the price of apples with a traveling merchant. No one seemed to notice Alden. No one looked at him as someone special, and that was fine. At the end of the street that sloped down toward the square, he saw two familiar figures. Kylor and Kyle walked together, side by side, moving without concern. Kylor gestured as he spoke, exaggerating some detail of the story he was telling, and Kyle laughed, openly, youthfully, a laughter Alden could not remember hearing in a long time. They carried no visible weapons. There was no tension in their posture. Only his uncle and his cousin, sharing the road. Alden felt a smile form on his face without realizing it. He took a step toward them, and then a hand closed around his arm. "And what are you doing standing there?" a woman's voice said, amused. "My father has been waiting for you for quite a while." Alden turned his head. Elena stood beside him. Her hair was gathered carelessly, as always, loose strands escaping around her face. Flour dusted the sleeve of her dress, and a dark stain marked her apron. She smiled, not in mockery, but with that familiar mixture of affection and reproach that belonged to her alone. "Come," she added, tugging him gently. "If you are late again, Father will not let you hear the metal for a week." Alden let her lead him. The touch was real. The warmth of her hand, the light pressure of her fingers. They hurried along the street toward the forge, leaving the square and its kindly noise behind. As they drew closer, the hammer's sound grew clearer, more rhythmic. A heartbeat. Bram's forge stood open. Heat spilled out into the street like a steady breath. Alden crossed the threshold and was met by the unmistakable scent of red-hot metal, coal, the honest sweat of years of labor. Bram was there. Before the anvil, hammer raised, torso leaning forward. The blow fell with precision, and the sound filled the space with deep resonance. Bram lifted his head as he sensed Alden's presence. "About time," he said, without harshness. "I thought you would make me work alone today." Alden opened his mouth to apologize, but found there was no need. He felt complete, whole, as though nothing were out of place. Elena leaned against the side table and watched him. "Go," she said, "before the metal cools." Alden stepped toward the anvil. Then Elena spoke again. She did not raise her voice. She did not change her tone. She leaned a fraction closer and whispered, "Alden, wake up." He frowned. "What?" Elena's smile did not vanish, but something in her eyes changed. A soft, nearly imperceptible sadness crossed her gaze. "Alden," she repeated, "wake up." The world trembled, not like an earthquake, like an image held poorly in place. The forge light flickered. The hammer's sound grew distant, distorted. Elena took a step back, and her figure began to fade like smoke in wind. "No," Alden said, reaching for her. "Wait." The forge dissolved. The square vanished. Hearthglen went out. Alden opened his eyes. The light that met him was not warm or gold, but pale and cold. Elven crystal light cast a milky glow over damp rock walls. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of earth and wet stone. The cold seeped into his back before he was fully aware of where he was. The abyss. He blinked several times, disoriented. Liana leaned over him, one hand resting carefully on his shoulder. Her face was close, but her voice was barely more than a murmur. "Easy," she whispered. "It was only a dream." Alden swallowed. The memory of Hearthglen still beat in his chest. Too vivid, too real. "Elena," he said, without meaning to. Lyanna did not smile, she did not ask. "Dren is on watch," she said. "Outside." She nodded toward the narrow entrance of the fissure. "He says he wants to speak with you." Alden nodded slowly. He sat up with care, making as little sound as possible. Around him, the others slept, or pretended to. Cale breathed with difficulty, the bandage still visible beneath the crystal light. Sarah lay against the wall, weapons close, eyes closed but body tense. Doran snored low like a distant rumble. Alden rose to his feet. The dream faded, but the feeling remained. For an instant before moving toward the entrance, he looked at the rock wall in front of him. Hearthglen had been intact. That was what hurt most. And as he approached the narrow passage, where the abyss waited in silence, Alden understood that not all awakenings bring relief. Some only remind you what no longer exists. The narrow passage opened only enough to allow a body through. Alden stopped a few steps from the entrance and listened before he leaned out. He heard nothing but distant dripping and the faint brush of his own breath. He steadied his chest, reduced it to the bare minimum, and then moved forward. Dren stood near the threshold, body angled so as not to protrude too far. One knee bent, one hand braced against the rock, the other resting near one of his daggers. He did not stare ahead. He watched the sides. The dimness the crystal light barely touched, as though waiting for something to betray itself by accident. Alden took his place beside him without a word. They remained that way for several heartbeats. "It has not moved in hours," Dren murmured at last without turning his head. His voice was so low it sounded like a thought. "Are you sure?" Alden replied in the same tone. "I have not heard the blows again," Dren said. "Not one. Not near, not far." He paused. "That does not mean it has gone, but it also does not mean it is waiting here." Alden nodded slowly. The darkness beyond the passage looked untouched, as though the cavern had swallowed every trace of motion. Yet the stillness did not soothe him. It was a taut stillness, heavy with intent, like an animal that stops moving so it will not give itself away. "It may have shifted to another area," Dren added, "or it may be listening from farther off. Or it may be hunting," Alden said. Dren let out a brief breath through his nose. "Yes." He fell silent for a moment before continuing. "Staying here is not an option." Alden did not answer at once. He glanced back toward the vault where the others rested. Crystal light reflected on damp stone and on Cale's bandage. He could imagine the lingering pain, the accumulated exhaustion, the contained fear no one spoke aloud. "Cale needs time," Alden said. "And he has had it," Dren replied. "The most we can afford." Then he turned and looked Alden in the eye. "Alden, this place is not shelter. It is a pause the abyss granted us by accident, and pauses do not last." Alden tightened his jaw. "If we go out and it finds us again, it will find us if we stay," Dren cut in. "The difference is that here we will have no space to run." The words hung between them. Alden looked back into the darkness. For a moment he thought of Hearthglen, the square, Elena, Bram's hammer. He thought of how easy it had been to walk those streets without wondering what lay behind every shadow. He closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, the decision was already made. "Wake the others," he said, "but do it slowly, quietly." He paused. "Tell them we move in silence. No talking, no metal striking, signals only if necessary." Dren nodded. "I will." "I will cover the exit," Alden replied. Dren lifted a brow. "It is not a discussion," Alden added softly. "If something is listening, I would rather it hear me." Dren watched him a heartbeat longer than usual. Then he nodded once. "I will not be long." He slipped back, disappearing into the inner passage's dimness. Alden remained alone at the entrance. The darkness before him did not move. It did not breathe. It did not strike stone. That did not calm him. He allowed himself one last glance back into the fissure, into the precarious refuge they were about to abandon. Then he turned again toward the abyss. Out there, somewhere he could not see, something still wandered. He did not know whether it had lost them, or whether it had simply chosen to wait. Alden rested his hand on his sword hilt and stood motionless, attuned to every echo, every imperceptible vibration. Because advancing was not a brave choice. It was the only one that did not end with stone closing over them.